Can you hear me?
I can hear you well. You can hear me? Cool. I don't expect we'll take up the full time on this because there's not a whole lot for me to present. And I just read about the topic. You know, I'd heard it in the news generally, but hadn't really looked into it. And you posted that topic. So I went and read the Wikipedia, read a couple other things real quick. So general outline here. And let's see, on a scale of 1 to 10, like how convinced am I? I'm going to say we're talking like 6.5, 7-ish. I think it's probably more likely than not. As far as Putin specifically, I'm going to say here that I'm considering Putin murdering somebody to mean his government led by him, authorized by him, or at least with his complicit approval. Rather than, of course, he didn't go anywhere and kill anybody himself, right? Or
yeah,
he was not an assassin, right? So
yeah, I accept that.
Okay, cool. So I think there's a couple different parts to this. One is, I guess, would Putin be responsible? And then kind of the level down from that is the Russian government responsible, which is more the official narrative on it, and why and what meets the criteria of being compelling rather than just sort of, I don't know, dismissible or whatnot. So let's go over the scenario. And if I bring up a claim, now I'm gonna say what's claimed here at first, right? If I bring up a claim that you think is not part of the narrative or is wrong, let me know. And then we can discuss whether or not there's evidence to support said claims, right? Which is a little bit different. And I'm going to be taking a little bit of approach as where like what an abductive reasoning, if you don't know what that is, that basically says what's the best explanation for the information that we have at hand, right? So not a deductive statement saying that something is absolutely positively 100% sure true, or an inductive statement, which is really about what's most likely or less likely, although I might bring that in. But abductive is sort of like which tab best fits slot, and then that's probably our best explanation that we have. So the case is this guy Skripal. He was a Russian agent working for Secret Service in Russia since the 1980s. He became a double agent working for British intelligence during that time, not immediately from what I understand, but sometime after he started his career as a Russian agent. He was turned to be a British double agent. He was discovered by the Russian government. And during that discovery, they, put him on trial for treason, threw him in jail. The Russian government and the British government did a program of spy exchange, basically people that the Brits had jailed for being Russian spies and the people the Russians had jailed for being British spies. They made a secret agreement, as nations sometimes do with spies, and they exchanged them. And he was one of those spies that went from Russia, was given his freedom, not legally, but as part of this exchange, to go and settle in England. Not too long after his arrival, he and his wife turned up to be very sick. They're in the hospital currently, a very serious illness. The British government has determined that a nerve agent is responsible for this.
Wait, can I stop you? You said sure. Not long after he was exchanged? I
believe so, yeah.
Years later.
Years later?
Many years later.
Okay. Well, it's okay. Like I said, just read this. So he was exchanged. Let's see.
Anna Chapman. Remember that whole Russian spy thing that was going on under Obama and I think it was 2013 or 2012 or something like that.
Vaguely. That doesn't.
Russian girl, Anna Chapman.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't strike me as so long ago, particularly. Well, I mean, so the poisoning happened in 2018.
My skepticism is
okay. So there was a 2010 spy swap. It says here, yeah.
Okay, 2010. Even so, 8 years ago.
So 8 years ago, right? The spy swap took place. Okay, so shortly, I guess, relatively speaking, not so much here. Okay, so we'll say 8 years to be specific. I think
right. But I just want to. My skepticism is based on three things. It's method.
Well, let me finish laying out the scenario, because I think if anyone's gonna want to address this issue and they haven't read it, I want them to have the full kind of timeline before we go on that, right? So I'm just trying to lay out the story for people who don't know about it. Right. So, okay. So 8 years later, this guy comes down really ill. He and his wife, the British, he goes to emergency room, symptoms are very strange, etc. They decide after investigation, because he's a well-known spy and whatnot, there's going to be some extra suspicion, that he was poisoned with a nerve agent. Both him and his wife, and apparently one other police officer that responded to the scene when they took ill, and they've identified this nerve agent as being one that British intelligence thinks was developed during the Soviet era in the USSR. The Russian government denies that. They claim that they've destroyed all such nerve agents. They don't have such nerve agents. The police who've taken over the investigation have said that the nerve agent was on a personal effect that was in the luggage, essentially, of his wife when they came from Russia during that exchange program. And that was the source, they determined, of the nerve agent rather than something that was delivered later on the scene. They looked all around at different places, and that is what they determined to be the source of the nerve agent. It wasn't actually.
It was his, actually.
Oh, his daughter. Sorry, that's wife. Right. Okay, very good. Like I said, well, just so. Want to square those things away because, like I said, I just finished reading about it, so I spent about 20 minutes doing my research. Okay, so his daughter, yeah. So that's the source of the nerve agent, right? So that's pretty much the story. The idea is that because he was an ex-spy, a traitor, in order to get revenge on them, they planted this nerve agent so that later, at some unspecified time, he would die from it, and they would punish him for his traitorous behavior, even though they made the spy swap exchange. That's the current sort of story and scenario line. People are pretty upset because it's the first time that like nerve agent has been used against somebody in a NATO area, et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very illegal against a lot of international conventions. The Russian government denies it, and that's kind of where we're at, I believe, as far as the news story goes. So, okay, I've finished my narrative. Go ahead and give me the main points of critique, I guess.
Yeah, so I'll make the case for skepticism. I think it revolves around three basic issues: method, motive, and timing. It's not clear to me why, as far as timing, why they would wait 8 years to kill him. And also, as far as timing is concerned, why now, right? Like, why would Russia want to kill someone in this specific manner using a known banned chemical agent when Russia is actively trying to promote its image in the world of being a modern nation that is subject to international laws and in compliant with international laws and things of that nature. So that goes to motive, in my opinion. There is no clear motive for why Russia would do this, especially at this time using this particular method.
Okay, so I can respond to that. If we accept the claim that and of course we don't have much other than people's word on things at this point, right? If we accept the claim that the source of the nerve agent was a personal effect that was packed from the trip to England, it's quite possible that Russia was not in control of the timing, that it just so happened that she interacted in a meaningful way with this object 10 years later, 8 years later, and became infected. It was basically a time bomb that was sitting there just waiting for the right moment for her to interact with it in such a way that she would become infected, and naturally, I'm sorry, his daughter, and naturally in some way she would end up infecting him, or he interacted with it. I don't know what this object is, so, but that's the claim. So Russia wouldn't be in control of the timing. It would just be when they made the spy swap, they wanted this person dead for obviously being a double agent is one of the most sort of revenge-worthy or insidious things that you want to punish when you're in spy agencies. You don't want your spies to think they can get away with being double agents, right? So you want to kill them or throw them in jail, do something bad to them any way you can to discourage that kind of behavior for any spy who thinks twice about betraying their government, right? Pretty typical spy stuff. So that would be the motive, and the timing is out of their control at that point.
So that explanation makes sense if you don't think about it that much. But what you're really suggesting here is that Russia is going to jeopardize all future spy exchanges now to kill this particular spy in this particular manner at this time?
I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case.
So, do you think spy exchanges are going to be more likely or less likely in the future?
Generally speaking, when it comes to spy exchanges, people are going to make a decision at the time. Basically, both parties have to want something that the other people have, and if they want it bad enough, then they'll make a trade, just like any other kind of trade. So does it erode trust with Russia? Yeah, but how much trust did Russian and American and British spy agencies have for each other? Not a whole lot. But when, if they think they can get an advantage, they're going to go ahead and do it anyway.
Enough to exchange spies, apparently.
Yeah, sure.
So there's now that trust being eroded, which...
Sure, maybe you lose a little trust in the long run, but maybe you don't. Maybe people are desperate enough, they'll do what they need to do. I don't know that spy exchanges are something people are feel as important as it is the motive of stopping people from being double agents, which I think is probably much more significant.
Now, as far as his daughter, one thing I'm not clear about, are they suggesting that this nerve agent sat in her luggage for 8 years?
That would be the implication. The only thing I read is that the police had reported that they believe the source of the nerve agent was an item that they packed out of Russia and took to the UK when the spy exchange occurred. So it was something they brought from Russia that was actually the source of the nerve agent, not like an attack or something.
I read that same line. I guess are you talking about the Telegraph article? Because I read that same line, and I was thinking maybe she just went back to visit Russia.
Yeah, let me see what the source is. I'm going to switch away from the window and take a look at.
Because if it was sitting there for 8 fucking years, that seems extraordinary unlikely. I think what probably happened is she went back to visit Russia recently. Okay.
That seemed like it would be a better scenario in some regards. I agree. So the quotation is from, let's see. Oh, I should open that in a new window. It's from the Telegraph. Suitcase spy poisoning plot. Nerve agent was planted in luggage of Sergei Skripal's daughter. Before she left Moscow, but when?
Yeah, I'm thinking it's highly likely that she's visited recently.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've got a lovely little paywall here.
Oh, wait, okay, hang on a second. She lives in Moscow, or she lived in Moscow, apparently. I'm reading on the Mirror.
Okay, so this wouldn't be the time of the spy exchange, it would be later.
Yeah, she's understood to have been visiting Britain from her home in Moscow.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, all right. So she brought it from Moscow. That's where she lives, and it was transported. So that would bring us to a more recent timing, which I suppose could just be a matter of opportunity. But that changes my argument, certainly, right? So it wasn't a time bomb set earlier. It was something more recent that was deployed.
I don't know, because Russia assassinates people in much less controversial ways all around the world. I mean, to me, it just doesn't make any fucking sense to do it in such a way that would point directly back to Russia.
Well, okay, so there's a few things, right? Of course, they deny that they have this kind of nerve agent, right? Russia says, we don't have this nerve agent, comrades. No, no, we don't have this kind of nerve agent. Some people have denied that it ever existed within that territory, like the USSR never developed it either. Other Russian officials have said, yes, the USSR developed that kind of thing, but we destroyed it all. We don't know where it came from or who has it. Right?
I'm leaning towards the Soviet Union almost certainly was manufacturing this substance. Because that's just based on the writings of 2 Russian chemists. But it doesn't seem like they have a clear motive to make it up, because they wrote the paper in Russia soon after the Soviet Union fell. So it doesn't seem like they, and he was an intelligence officer anyways. So it doesn't seem like they would just be making that whole thing in. So I accept that the Soviet Union probably did manufacture this substance at some point in the past 70s or 80s or something. But I don't know.
They will have kept some, or maybe not. I wouldn't know. I'm sure they destroyed a lot of it. There were apparently inspections, and they destroyed it under supervision of international agencies when it comes to chemical weapons. They point out that the U.S. hasn't followed suit with all of those cases either, which is also true, but not. They're kind of intimating that maybe America or Britain could have done it because we also would have access to these kinds of weapons, which is true. But if we were to look, when you're talking about motive, right, you're looking kind of beyond the very face obvious motive, which is, hey, he's a double agent. We want to off him when we get the opportunity. The problem is if you look at the U.S. or England, to be able to do or to have a motivation for doing this, to kill a double agent that they traded for and who served their interests is even more weird. It's hard to imagine who else has any motive at all, as where the Soviet, Russia has a very straightforward motive, it's a very simple motive. It may be if we look at it, we can kind of find some problems with it. I mean, obviously, it has caused a lot of kerfuffles, and they would know that, right? They would know that it wouldn't just go undetected, right? So they would had to have made a calculation that they were okay with this amount of chaos. Maybe they figured they can spin it easily because of the current climate and skepticism about stories related to Russia and espionage. They've managed to deflect a lot of the concerns about hacking and all that. And so maybe they figure they can do the same thing with this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if you don't think about it that much, that makes sense. But I mean, there are other.
But no, I mean, even if you do think about it, it still makes sense. As where what would be the motive for anybody else to murder him? Who has a motive to murder this guy?
Okay, so another motive has been suggested that this guy was actually he just happened to have been working with Orbis Intelligence. That's who Christopher Steele represents, I guess.
But Christopher Steele is like an independent ex-British spy who now works for private investigators.
Mm-hmm. And so
why would he A, have access to like top secret nerve agents, and B, why would he want to kill this guy?
Well, the theory that's been suggested is that here, let me read from here. So-called it's imploding. I guess because Russiagate's more or less imploding at this point.
So we're gonna kill a guy who's, so far as we know, completely unrelated to it.
Well, he might have had. I suspect he was the primary source for much of the information that came from Russians, right? I think.
Why do you suspect that?
Because Christopher Steele was in Moscow at the time that he was a double agent as well, and then when he got exchanged back to Britain, he's now working for the same fucking company.
Okay, somewhat plausible, but would he be the only one who has whatever this information is?
Well,
I mean, would you stop?
For sure.
So if you kill this guy, does that silence everybody who would be related to the Steele memo, which is already public knowledge for the most part, right?
Well, no. Look, here's what this one author says. His name, he's James O'Neill, and he says, my admittedly speculative hypothesis, but I would argue not an unreasonable one, is that Skripal was likely involved in the production of the Steele dossier. He was therefore in a position to offer potentially very damaging information into the circumstances of the Steele dossier. As noted above, that particular narrative.
What, right? I mean, we already know the Steele dossier was basically just kind of like intelligence gathered from sources that Steele had in Soviet intelligence and diplomacy and stuff like that, right? These are people he knew. He asked them questions. They told him rumors that they had heard about. He wrote them down and delivered them to his bosses, right? What kind of, I mean, that's a motive to kill somebody? I mean, the document's already there. We know the motives are basically just kind of hearsay for the most part, right? So that's not like some kind of grand secret or anything you would kill somebody for.
Well, yeah, if people are investigating this and they know how this document was produced and he's a key witness.
Yeah, but we already know how it's produced. And it's like the problem that people have with it, right? It's a fake document, et cetera, right? Is because the information is just intelligence hearsay, right? It's just somebody told me that this was true and I wrote it down. And so how do we know that those things actually happened or didn't happen? That's the problem with it. It's unverifiable information because it's mostly hearsay and secondhand accounts, right? So why would that be a grand secret? I mean, you just say anything. What's going to be so sinister about, hey, did you hear any dirt on Putin and Trump? And somebody said something, right? that's killing somebody. I don't get it, right? Like, what's
No,
the big secret that he's going to reveal? The only reasonable secret, the only thing that would be scandalous, is if some of it, if there was like actual evidence of prostitutes pissing on Donald Trump or something like that. That would be earth-shattering, and that might actually be important. Somebody might kill for something like that. But that would be Trump's people trying to kill somebody, and I don't think that's realistic. So what wouldn't be earth-shattering is anything else, right? I mean, it's hardly widely discounted by most critics, and it's not especially central to most narratives in the current media of why people think that these stories are legitimate. So, I mean, it's just completely without any purpose. And the main guy, Steele, who wrote the darn thing, is still alive and unattacked. Nobody's tried to assassinate him. It would be kind of silly.
Well, he might be the assassin. So, I mean, that's
why would Steele kill this guy, right? I mean, it's not like Steele is making any kind of special claims, right? Like, nobody's using this document as the dagger in the heart of Donald Trump or anybody else. And while Steele doesn't like Donald Trump, he's not even an American citizen. He doesn't really have any control or sway. It's just, I think this is a really far-fetched scenario, as where it's a lot more reasonable to say, hey, Russia likes to set an example and finish off its double agents when it can. Steele, by the way, we have to also bring in the means into this, right? So the nerve agent arrived from his daughter from Russia. Steele is not a Russian citizen. He doesn't have access to her luggage, so far as we know, doesn't know her particularly. How would he get into Russia in order to plant a nerve agent to kill this guy off? Or is he hiring secret, shadowy Russian people? I mean, who is it? That's where the nerve agent allegedly comes from, as where the Russian government has pretty much access to anything in Russia. Be very easy for them to pull this off.
All right. So are you seriously suggesting that an intelligence professional does not have contacts in Russia?
To be able to order a murder of a prominent person using an incredibly illegal and rare nerve agent? Yeah, I don't think Daniel Steele has that kind of pull.
Okay, so how rare do you suppose such nerve agents are? How much money do you think it would be required in order to acquire them?
I would presume that this nerve agent is incredibly rare. I mean, it took, you know, a major superpower in order to develop this nerve agent. Apparently, only a few very rich, powerful countries have access to the means to create this substance. No. From what I'm told.
It's not true.
Okay, so what is true?
So Iran recently synthesized, you know, all 6 of, you know, the things, put them on mass spectrometer so that people could know exactly what it is, what it does, how to handle it, shit like that. So,
Iran?
Yeah, Iran.
Okay, like where did they do this, and under what circumstances?
In Iran. In
Iran. That's pretty vague, man.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't have a link. I don't know their precise location, but I know that this happened.
Okay, too vague for me. Not very compelling, but I mean, I could say, you know, Uzbekistan totally has nuclear weapons because, you know, they do.
Assuming that I'm not making this up, and Iran did synthesize these chemicals, which that would contradict what you're saying, right?
Not necessarily, but it would certainly argue against it to some degree. It would say that they are more common than only available to elite superpowers. I mean, Iran also ostensibly has the technology to work towards building nuclear weapons, centrifuges, and that sort of thing. So they're not like a backwards country.
So do you think it's entirely impossible that the U.S. or British governments would murder a person in order to promote certain foreign policy agendas? Is that totally out of the question in your mind? Not totally out of the question, but it would have to be, you know, pretty compelling example. And if they were going to do it, they wouldn't be trying to draw a lot of attention to it. I mean, I guess, you know, that scenario would be some sort of false flag, like, so we're going to pretend that a guy was murdered by Russians. But at that point, you just, like, we can't look at any evidence, right? We would just have to say, look, we have nobody that we can trust to tell us what happened.
because if the Russian if the British government is the one behind this, then they could just make up all the facts, right? And we would not be able to do anything about it.
Yes.
And at that point, we're just left going, you know,
that's what we're doing right now. I mean, they asserted something.
Yeah,
I
have a certain amount of trust in the English government, the English people, that they don't go murdering their own double agents just to try and pin the blame on another government so that they can impose sanctions. I think that's pretty preposterous.
Why would they do that? Well, I mean,
because they don't gain anything by it.
Well, they do. I just told you.
What are they gaining? What are they getting?
Their foreign policy agenda.
What is their foreign policy agenda in this case?
Anti-Russian hysteria.
Anti-Russian hysteria. So how do they benefit from that?
There's a foreign policy establishment that desires conflict with Russia. Some people
really? Why do they desire conflict with Russia?
For the same military-industrial complex. It's
the military-industrial complex.
Many have ideological reasons for this. Such as what?
What are those ideological reasons?
Well, some people are just Cold Warriors. They're just left over from previous ideologies that existed here in the United States.
Are those people in control at the highest levels of British government, do you think?
Well, yeah, of course they are.
Right. So the fact that the Britons elect representatives and people to parliament that control the intelligence organizations, and
they don't control.
And over the years, the Cold Warriors are still there after all these years in control of the British government.
Well, who's in control?
That sounds pretty preposterous.
Do you think Trump is in control of the CIA? Is that your view?
Partly, yeah.
I don't think he's in control of the CIA at all.
I think he gets to meet and direct the CIA to a large degree. Yeah, he's not in complete control because I mean he can't tell them to do illegal. I shouldn't say illegal with the CIA, but he can't tell them to do things that are outside of their mission parameters, you might say. But he decides who runs the CIA, and those people get to direct members of the CIA to do what he wants. So I mean, they're not his plaything, but yes, he is their boss.
Okay, so why are they doing things that are explicitly and unambiguously damaging to him personally?
Oh, because they're not sycophants.
Okay, so he's not in control of them because they're
he is to some degree in control. He doesn't have his minute fingers in every office in the CIA and directing every investigation personally. That's not how presidents work. Presidents delegate authority. They sit up at the top. They pick directors for those agencies. Those directors then do actions within those agencies. But yeah, it's not like the United States isn't just some sort of dictatorial monarchy or something where President Trump gets to tell everybody exactly what to do. It doesn't work like that. Never has. It's not
so the CIA, are they keeping any secrets at all from? I mean, would the CIA keep secrets from a president?
I don't think legally they are allowed to.
Legally, they are allowed to. So,
well, I mean, obviously, if I'm a CIA agent and I want to keep a secret from the president, and I just don't open my fucking mouth, then I can keep a secret from the president, right? That's not too hard.
Right. So,
however,
does the CIA
are
only
they
do things that they're legally allowed to do?
No.
Does the CIA only do things that they're legally allowed to do? Is that your?
Probably more than not, but I'm sure. I'm not naive enough to think that they never do anything that's off the books to some degree, right? I mean, that's kind of what they're there for.
Torturing people, or
well, they've been allowed to do that, intentionally. We gave them permission,
but it's illegal. It always has been illegal.
Right, but not. We set the laws for what the CIA can do, not like international treaties. So the president can tell the CIA, and did during the Bush administration, and to some lesser degree during the Obama administration, that they can go ahead and do some of those things.
So Bush wasn't even informed about it until after the fact.
Bush was publicly for enhanced interrogation, right?
After
he came out.
He became a big supporter, but he wasn't even informed about the program. Was already commencing before he even knew about it.
Well, that's quite possible, yeah.
So obviously, the CIA does do things that are totally outside of what the president orders, or they're certainly outside of the Democratic process.
But they'd be following through with something they think they should be able to do based on their own organization and the way it works.
Wait, say that again. I'm sorry.
I said they would be following through on what they think is their mission and their allotment of what they're supposed to be doing, right? So if they think that the enhanced interrogation is part of their mission during wartime efforts, right? They've been given prisoners. They're like, we're going to give these guys custody to the CIA, and you can go ahead and we want you to get information from them. We're not going to tell you exactly how. Yeah, they may feel that in enhanced interrogation, they're going to come up with something. They're like, well, technically it's not torture. We're just waterboarding. We're not cutting people's fingers off or something. And so we're going to do this. It's going to be okay. And we'll get permission.
What about
we'll do it first
spying on
later.
Is that part of their charter, or are they supposed to be?
I don't think so. I think that would be incredibly illegal for them to, without Congress's knowledge, or without the knowledge of people who are on the Security Council, to be able to, say, wiretap members of Congress who are not part of a criminal investigation or the like. That would be incredibly illegal.
Okay, yeah, I agree. And so it is the case that the CIA can and often does do things that are
Why, do you
illegal.
have evidence that the CIA spied on members of Congress?
Oh, yeah, that's a known fact. I mean, they hacked into congressional staffers' computers. Then when they were asked about it specifically, John Brennan said, no, we're not doing that. Got busted. And then John Brennan had to go apologize to Congress, and nobody was ever charged with anything.
What was the time frame of this?
It's the usual that nobody in the CIA is ever charged with anything. I mean, that's
when was it? Well, yeah, they don't get charged with stuff a lot. That's true. But what was the time frame of this incident you were talking about?
Under Obama.
Okay.
So at some point under Obama,
but they broke into the computer of some staffers. Yeah, I mean, it's a little different than like wiretapping a congressman directly, but I'm not trying to justify it, right? I still think it's wrong. But let's just say on the scales of things you think you can get away with, that is probably a little better than like tapping John McCain's telephone or something, right? To which you're going to get shitstorm if you do that. But
okay, so
I don't know, but I guess your point is you're trying to develop a plausibility case for, you know, the deep state, et cetera, both in England and America, orchestrating this plot just so that they can inflame ties with Russia, just so that we can have the Cold War that we always love so much, from many decades ago, and thus spur the military-industrial complex. It's all pretty Rothschild, Illuminati stuff, right? And I never found
No, hang on, because I let you talk for like 5 or 10 minutes.
Sure, go for it, man.
Your conspiracy theory is equally ridiculous in my
Really, that Russia wanted to kill off a double agent.
Yes.
That's amazingly complicated.
Oh, no, because they had so many opportunities to kill this man. And
right, so they didn't kill him quicker. Wow.
Well, yes. Can you explain why they would wait 8 years to kill him?
They had the opportunity.
Okay, so is this the first
or maybe
time?
They thought they could get away with it.
Is this the first time his daughter has ever visited her father?
I have no idea.
In your view? No, okay, so it's not, obviously.
It could be the first time that a Russian agent was close enough to her in order to plant this kind of a device.
She lives in Moscow, or she lived in Moscow. Sure. So, yeah, I'd say that would be true on a daily basis.
Maybe not.
Okay, so
I mean, a lot of spies, the way they work is they build relationships with people. They don't know they're spies, and it takes time to build up those kinds of trust. And when you get that kind of a trust, then you can do the thing that you were meant to do, either try to influence the person, gain access to their files, et cetera, et cetera.
That's how they work. Do you think it is to plant something in someone's luggage? I mean, do you think that's a particularly difficult thing to do?
Not especially. I guess it depends on what it is. We don't know exactly what this thing is. So, I mean, you could just break into their house. If it's something you know they're going to take with them somehow, then you could break into their house and you could plan it ahead of time.
No. Well,
luggage, well, you could just do it at the airport, perhaps. But the thing is you'd have to do it on something they own. You have to know what it is. I don't know. It could be complicated.
Think about your conspiracy theory.
Sure.
You were saying it's the Russian government. So at any fucking time that they were in Russia.
Sure.
As the fucking bags being loaded on the...
Yeah, but I mean, the timing thing is a pretty minor quibble. Why now instead of later? But the real question is why at all? And we have a very obvious and easy explanation. As to exactly what their timing is, you're getting us to try and speculate what Russian intelligence is thinking and when they think
it's a hole in the theory.
Time or not time to do
something. It's a giant hole in the theory.
It's not a big hole. It's a tiny little hole. And it's just a question. Why kill them now instead of why kill them later? Why would there be?
I'm asking the same question.
Later.
I don't understand the same question that you're saying. You're like, well, why would America or Great Britain, assassinate this guy too? I gave you an answer.
Right, a very convoluted and long-winded answer that, is very...
Okay. Let me make it clear.
My answer is real simple, man.
Mine is
He's
too.
a double agent. They wanted to off him.
My answer is simple too. They wanted to advance a foreign policy agenda.
Yeah, well, they're not. It's not going to do anything useful. I mean,
what do you mean it's not?
Look, it's real easy to decide you don't like Russia and to do something against them. You've got all kinds of different arenas in which you can do that, or you can accuse them of bad things. You don't need to go killing all your own secret agents.
I have a response to that. There's a lot of ways to kill a double agent too.
Well, great, yeah, and they found one and they killed him.
Yep, and there's a lot of yeah, exactly. And the U.S. and UK governments wanted to push this foreign policy agenda, and so they killed him.
Yeah, well, it's a really stupid and sloppy and not very pinpoint way
I agree.
to try and carry out that kind of an agenda.
Yes, that was an incredibly
so not only are they incredibly complicated conspiracy theory that just internets all these different actors into where we cheese this game, but it's also really dumb, right? That's awesome. So they're incredibly smart to be able to orchestrate this incredible conspiracy, but also really stupid because it's a bad conspiracy.
That's how I view your conspiracy theory. I view it as incredibly.
Right. It's really complicated. It's not complicated that Russia wants to finish off a double agent because
it's not complicated that the
right. That's not complicated at all.
Has a
Your only
question
is why did they wait a while to do it? To which I gave you various plausible, relatively simple explanations. Either they didn't quite have the opportunity that you can surmise they had all kinds of opportunities, but you don't know.
In 8 years.
Right.
No, we do know that. We know that.
For whatever reason they have. I don't know what that is, but I can plausibly imagine all kinds of reasons. Maybe they were about to do some program that this guy happened to know things about. Maybe he had made some statements in public they didn't like. I don't know.
He wrote books too. I mean, there were a lot of opportunities to kill this person, and a lot of different ways that he could have been killed.
But he was killed by a nerve agent that originated in Russia, and which Russia had, which the Soviet Union had developed once upon a time, and so they had easy access to. Those arrows
can also be produced
elsewhere. Compelling point to Russia.
It can also be produced elsewhere. 1, 2. You're suggesting they used something that was known to be produced in Russia. So that the finger points right back to fucking Russia.
And what the fuck do they care, man? They just deny it.
How does this help Russia?
Because it says to their spies, if you're a double agent, you will die.
But they already know that.
Do they? Do they? On Russian state television in response to this, they went over a list. The actual Russian state television went over a list of Russian traitors and ex-agents that have gone to England and died under mysterious circumstances, either accidents or uranium poisoning or other terrible things. It's strange how Russian double agents tend to wander over when they leave England, these Russian traitors, and they get killed in mysterious ways while they're in England, often after they had visited Russia recently.
And how many times were they killed with Novichok poisoning?
None. This is the first time. How many times did they kill with uranium-13 radiation poisoning? Maybe 1 or 2. Like people use different methodologies. It's not like these things are all that strange.
In your conspiracy theory, they exchanged him 8.
Yeah. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a simple murder, by the way. He's an ex-Russian spy, and they killed him. That's not a conspiracy.
That's your conspiracy theory.
It's a criminal. It's not even a conspiracy because a conspiracy requires a lot of different actors. No, a conspiracy requires a lot of different actors to conspire together for an outcome.
Russian state. There's a lot of actors in the Russian state.
No, just one in this case, which is their intelligence bureau.
Okay, so that's one person or what?
No, it's one person, but it's one unified motive. It doesn't require different, disparate people to come together. Like things like 9/11, right? That's a conspiracy theory because it not only, it was self-detonated, right? Because it requires the airlines to be included. It requires the FBI to be inclusion. It requires the media to be inclusion.
Stop.
Right? That is a conspiracy.
You're saying, okay, we're gonna treat the Russian state as one actor. Okay, well, I'll treat America as one actor.
Right. So America is in control of the British intelligence and the British police force, because these are the people who are reporting on it.
Working together.
And the British government for making their statement, and all the European governments for agreeing with those statements. So that's all America as a single actor manages to do all that.
Well, hang on a second. The UK and the US government are on the same team here. So
so now you're saying America and the UK are the same government? They're one entity?
No, I never said that. I said they're on the same team. They're on the same side. Do you
right? Well, then that would be two different actors acting in concert for one goal, which would be a conspiracy.
But do you dispute that they have a shared foreign policy agenda?
Yeah, it's not 100% the same. They're on the same general side. They're allies. The US.
Okay, you know what? Then I'm just going to use your same simple logic. NATO's one organization.
Sure.
So boom, right there. So
boom.
Look.
What? So this was a NATO plot? NATO carried this out?
Two countries within NATO.
Is that your new theory?
Two countries within NATO. No, my theory is to criticize your theory presented out without any evidence.
No, it has lots of evidence, actually. There's a guy in a hospital and his daughter. They're both incredibly sick. They were poisoned with a rare nerve agent that was developed in the Soviet Union and was delivered to them in her luggage where she came from the Soviet Union. He is an ex-spy. From Russia. I get those things commingled sometimes. Don't mean to. Yeah. 8 years later.
Using a substance that points right back to Russia.
Sure, why not?
Well, I mean, that's a ridiculous conspiracy.
What's anybody going to do, right?
That's a ridiculous conspiracy. What are they going to do?
Right?
What are they going to do? They're going to impose sanctions. They're going to try to isolate Russia on the world stage, and
Don't we already have sanctions? Don't we already try to isolate Russia on the world stage? Isn't that already happening?
Now they have more popular support because you've just stoked this anti-Russian hysteria, which was dying down. It was dying down over the collusion hoax, right? And the hacking.
Yeah, but it wasn't dying down over Syria. It wasn't dying down over Yugoslavia, right?
The bogus hacking Ukraine also presented without evidence.
Yeah, well, most of the European countries also claim that they were hacked by Russia in one way or another. So,
and the German intelligence investigated that and found out that they were never hacked. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I'm sure everybody is making false claims just to badmouth Russia. It's not like Russia actually has hackers working for them. That would be a crazy idea.
Sure.
Or that they use those hackers to try and influence policy.
Where's the evidence? Show me.
Where's the evidence that Russia has hackers, right? Where's the evidence that the United States has hackers?
But that's not my argument, so I don't have to defend that. Sorry.
Okay, well, don't defend it.
You know that I'm not saying that
evidence that Russia has hackers.
You know that I'm not saying
for their intelligence group and that they're engaged in action.
I know that that that's not my argument, so I'm not going to defend that. I'm not
trying to attack you.
There are no hackers in Russia. You know that.
Okay, Russia has lots of hackers. The Russian government.
There's no reason for us to pretend that that's a legitimate dispute.
And they're very effective with that, by the way, as well.
Right, but there's no reason for me to pretend like you're making a legit argument here. You know that I.
But you don't have to pretend anything. Like the people who are going to watch this debate are going to look and say, "Is it a reasonable story? Is there compelling evidence, as I have outlined, that the Soviet Union likely murdered its ex-spy that was a double agent?" Right? They're going to decide if that's compelling or not. You're not going to agree to me ever. I didn't come here expecting to convince you. But I'm going to lay out the claim for other people.
You said Putin. Read the resolution. You said Putin was involved. You've presented no evidence.
Putin is the head of the Russian government. He used to be under the Soviet Union. He was the head of the intelligence agency. He still knows most of the people in the intelligence agency.
So
he ran the KGB for like 17 years. This guy knows how to do spycraft. If you don't think he's involved in spycraft in Russia, you're a fool.
You've not produced any evidence that the Russian government was ever involved in any of this.
We're not in a court of law here. This is just a case of whether or not there is compelling evidence, and the evidence is pretty compelling. There was a Russian ex-double agent who was murdered. using a weapon that Russia has access to and developed originally, and it came, the weapon was delivered from Russia itself. That is pretty compelling evidence. Nobody else has a clear motive, barring your crazy conspiracy theories.
Would that be compelling evidence that Russia did it? Hang on. If he were killed with an AK-47, would that be compelling evidence that Russia killed him?
No.
Because that was originally manufactured in the Soviet Union. So clearly that's evidence that
there are AK-47s all around the world. And, you know, if he was murdered with an AK-47 in Russia, then maybe.
Know that.
Yeah, we're out of time. Bye-bye.